Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the #1 pro sports talk show on MUTV, Tailgaters. I'm Josiah Schumann, and the winner of this week's Triple Play. Ben, I know it took you a couple days to sink in that loss, but how are you feeling right now, buddy?
Oh, you just had to do that, didn't you? Just had to throw that little jab right in the beginning of our show.
I just had to.
I'm feeling good. We're going live. We're talking baseball. Speaking of, happy spring training, Josiah.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
And you know what? I'm going to give a special shout out. It's very happy spring training to a certain Manny Machado.
Oh, yes, of course. And Manny Machado, as I'm sure you all know, he signed with the San Diego Padres, agreed upon the largest free agent deal in the history of North American sports at 10 years for $300 million. Ben, what does this mean for the Friars and for Machado?
I mean, this is the move we've been waiting for all offseason. It's incredible that it took us more than halfway into the month of February to get here, but this is what we've been waiting to see. Some team we knew was going to dish out an insane amount of money for Manny Machado, and I mean, it happened to be the Padres out west, but I think it's a great fit for the Padres and even more so for Manny Machado. You know, the Padres are a young team, not a whole lot of playoff experience there. Now they have Machado. They have Hosmer. They've had him since last year. Two guys that have playoff experience that will help that young team. And, you know, they have a lot of young talent that will especially help. He can help bring up, like Fernando Tatis Jr. But, you know, I just think that waiting this long to this kind of contract is what Machado is doing, and he executed it to perfection. Yeah, and getting Manny Machado, that gives you a franchise player, and he's one of the best hitters in the majors, terrific with his glove, perennial MVP candidate, and as you mentioned, he joins a team with a lot of young and up-and-coming prospects, including, you know, Tatis. And Tatis brings great power, great arm, athleticism. They could actually end up having a really good infield, too, defensively with Machado, Tatis, Eric Hosmer, and Luis Urias. I think this makes them a more competitive and better team, but not necessarily a playoff team. Sorry, Max Arnold, but they're not quite there yet. I agree with that.
But it definitely creates an amazing future ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, Manny Machado is one of the most prolific players in the game. He is going to create an impact as soon as he lands in camp. I mean, that team is going to have a whole new culture about it, especially with Hosmer last year. You know, they added Hosmer, and the kind of question was, you know, well, they added this one piece, but what does that do for the team? Now they stacked on another ginormous piece to that puzzle. So I think there is bright future ahead for the Padres.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving along, Cardinals veteran pitcher Adam Wainwright made some interesting comments this week about the state of the MLB in regards to free agency, saying, quote, I think unless something changes, there is going to be a strike 100%, and I don't think anybody is hiding that. Josiah, do you think that Waino's comments are warranted about the possibility of a strike?
I think they're certainly warranted. I mean, in all my days of following sports, I've never seen an offseason where superstars go unsigned this late.
Exactly.
And the fact that it took this long for Machado to finally get a deal, and the fact that Bryce Harper is still unsigned, it makes absolutely no sense to me. And not just them two, but there's also Craig Kimbrell, Dallas Keuchel, Bud Norris, and there's plenty others. Yeah. It just seems to me as if teams, they're positioning profit ahead of their responsibility to require talent.
Yeah.
They're placing economic considerations over fielding competitive team. And in the past year, the average major league salary has actually gone down, and players are getting signed later. And aside from Manny, they're getting signed for less, and I just think there's a huge problem with that.
Yeah, and not only that, I think teams are getting too wrapped up in all the analytics that come with baseball. You know, you got all your sabermetrics, you got your Billy Bean Moneyball type stuff. I think teams are just getting wrapped up too much into that. They're not looking into players' future potential. Bryce Harper is 26 years old. Yeah. He's played 2 MVP caliber seasons, and, you know, I mean, he might have had some kind of lackluster seasons before that, but he has so much potential ahead of him, and that's very clear to see. And teams are worried about how will he fit from a numbers standpoint, and I think that's the wrong way to go about it. It doesn't take into account, like I said, the intangibles, the things a player brings that there isn't a stat for. And I think Bryce Harper is one of the most competitive guys in baseball and probably the most competitive guy on the market now. And the fact that he isn't signed by the time that spring training games are already starting is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're focusing way too much on stats, and I mean, I just think it is ridiculous. And the fact that even though Harper's defense has declined, he still has a chance to get better. He's 26 years old, and It just doesn't make any sense. And of course, there's plenty of other players we mentioned. And teams are making so much more money, nowadays, and it's not, going to the players enough. And it makes no sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting that this probably wouldn't happen until the year 2021 when the collective bargaining agreement has reached its end.
Yeah.
But still, this could be in the very near future for the MLB.
Yeah. So, wrapping up our MLB talk, now that spring training games are beginning at the end of this week, Ben, which teams do you think are the most improved since last year?
I know we talked about it a lot on our show last week, but the Philadelphia Phillies, I think, have added the most impactful pieces to add on the team that they had last year. The Phillies went out. They made a splash with JT Realmuto. He is a phenomenal catcher. He is definitely going to be one of the best players, I think, in the NL East now. Well, he was last year with the Marlins, excuse me. But but not only that, they go out and they sign former MVP Andrew McCutchen. He's on the decline of his career, but that doesn't mean he's a bad player by any means. He's going to be able to fit into that outfield in Philadelphia very nicely. Not only that, though, they've went and they signed Aaron Nola. They've locked him up for 4 more years. I just think that the Phillies are doing everything right now, and they're doing their best to make the strides they need to be competitive in the NL East.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. But also, I would like to point out another NL East team, the New York Mets.
Yeah.
I mean, they were one of the busiest teams in this past offseason.
Yeah.
They get Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz in the blockbuster trade with the Mariners.
Right.
Cano, he's coming off that long suspension, but when he's been on the field, he still gives great offense.
Mm-hmm.
And Edwin Diaz was a terrific closer for the Mariners last year, so it really could help their bullpen. They also signed Wilson Ramos, Jed Lowry. They brought back Juris Familia, and then they bring in Justin Wilson, so they're really, creating a more formidable team.
Yeah.
Now, on paper, that looks like it could be a threat in the NL East, but obviously a lot of things have to go into place. Health is one of the biggest issues with this team right now, the biggest concern. And it's really the fact that whether all these players can fit together will be another thing. Because with Cespedes recovering from an injury, he's not going to be ready when the season begins. He'll be out for a while.
Right,
It seems like every year he gets hurt.
Yeah.
And then Noah Syndergaard, he's been off and on with injuries. So there's a lot of concerns with that. But I think if this Mets team can stay healthy, they are definitely a threat in their division.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think, got to give a shout-out to the St. Louis Cardinals.
Of course.
This is strictly talking from a building on top of last year's team standpoint, adding a Paul Goldschmidt, adding an Andrew Miller, filling in 2 pieces that they desperately needed. I mean, it's easy for me to talk about it as a Cardinals fan, but it's more than just that. I mean, adding on what they had last year, I think the Cardinals went out and did a great job.
Yeah.
But
no, I totally agree. And also the fact that you add those two to a team that's got quite a bit of young talent. You mentioned last week, Harrison Bader's really come on.
Right.
Jack Flaherty's been very impressive. So, I mean, this team has a legitimate shot to win the NL Central. And so it's looking pretty good right now.
that's what I like to hear coming from the mouth of a Cubs fan.
Oh.
But that's going to do it for our MLB talk. But be sure to stick around as we will play a little game of contender or pretender for the NBA after the break.